Very good morning. I'm going to be your moderator for this panel discussion. My name is Mira Sivisuli. If you listen to BFM, you probably will. You hear me in the afternoons from 2 o'clock to 5 o'clock. We're here today to discuss and explore the topic titled Bringing Health and Nutrition Back to Malaysian Children. A topic that we feel is of great importance. But before we proceed, allow me to share some brief background information with you regarding to this survey. So brief background, this nutrition has always been a well-known factor in the growth, health and development of children. It is also acknowledged that worldwide, many people have dietary imbalances resulting in over and undernutrition. And I think the WHO sort of foresaw this, that we would at some stage have this problem of overnutrition. I don't think back in the days our ancestors had dreamt that we would suffer from overnutrition. Although many countries in Southeast Asia had conducted surveys in the past, it is believed that health and nutrition information, especially in older infants and children, was no longer up to date. So with this in mind, a multinational Dutch dairy company, Royal Friesland Campina, initiated and facilitated the Southeast Asian Nutrition Surveys, also known as Seanuts, in 2009, in collaboration with 4 research institutes in Malaysia, in Indonesia, in Vietnam, and in Thailand. Seanuts is the largest and most extensive nutrition and health study ever done in Southeast Asia, where they sort of surveyed 16,744 children between the ages of 6 months and 12 years, and they were surveyed over a period of 4 years. In Malaysia, data was collected from May 2010 and October 2011 in 6 regions across the country, the northern, central, southern, and east coast around Peninsula Malaysia, and not leaving out, of course, Sabah and Sarawak. So what has the study sort of revealed? What are the implications of the findings on Malaysian children? How will this research affect and hopefully drive policymakers to make informed decisions to develop programs towards addressing the nutritional concerns amongst the younger generation? Well, this is going to be the discussion of today. But before that, we're actually going to play you a quick video to find out more about the Seanuts survey before we invite our panel participants to be a part of this discussion.
Every day, Friesland Campina supplies milk to nearly 1 billion children with all the right nutrients required for balanced growth. We provide better nutrition that is safe, hygienic, and affordable. Since more than half of the world's population live in our neighborhood, we have a bigger responsibility to make the world a better place to live. The major challenge we face in a child's growth and development today is malnutrition. A rapid socioeconomic progress and increased urbanization have given rise to a dual burden of malnutrition, that is, undernutrition and overnutrition. At Friesland Campina, we aim to better understand the nutritional status and needs of children. We therefore initiated the Southeast Asian Nutrition Surveys, or Seanuts. Seanuts surveyed the nutrition and health status of children in Malaysia, Thailand, Indonesia, and Vietnam, in close collaboration with 4 leading institutions in the countries. Our research partners were Persagi, or the Nutrition Association of Indonesia, University Kebangsaan, Malaysia, Mahidol University in Thailand, and the National Institute of Nutrition in Vietnam. Seanuts surveyed 16,744 children from 6 months to 12 years of age, including 7,211 children from Indonesia, 3,542 children from Malaysia, 3,119 children from Thailand, and 2,872 children from Vietnam. Seanuts consists of several in-depth assessments covering a wide range of survey protocols. The assessments of the data points included anthropometry and body composition, dietary intake, physical activity, cognition, blood analysis, and bone quality. This makes it one of the most comprehensive studies into the nutritional status of Southeast Asian children to date. The results from Seanuts are now published in the British Journal of Nutrition and highlights three main nutritional problems: undernutrition, which is the persistent problem, overnutrition, which is the emerging problem, and micronutrient deficiency. Undernutrition. Underweight and stunting continue to persist as a problem, especially in Indonesia and rural parts of Vietnam. Overnutrition. Overweight and obesity are major concerns in both urban and rural areas of Malaysia and Thailand. It is an emerging problem in urban Vietnam and Indonesia, with obesity being almost 3 times more prevalent in urban areas of Indonesia. Micronutrient deficiency. The results for micronutrient deficiency are even more alarming. Vitamin D deficiency has become a serious problem. Nearly 80% of the children had vitamin D levels below 75 nanomoles per liter, indicating widespread deficiency that warrants immediate action. Seanuts also revealed that dietary intake and patterns in these regions are inadequate, and that particular attention has to be given with respect to the intake of vitamin A, vitamin C, iron, and calcium in these 4 countries. Seanuts provides us with important information on the major nutritional imbalances in children from Malaysia, Indonesia, Vietnam, and Thailand. However, our work doesn't end here. Our goal is to work with the countries in helping them move ahead in life by providing the relevant support. With continued efforts, we can help improve the quality of life of our children, today, tomorrow, and in the years to come.
And without further ado, I'm inviting our panel speakers, lead researcher, Professor Dr. Paul B. Kuhn. Welcome. Dr. Paul is actually the head of Nutritional Sciences Program under the Faculty of Health Sciences, University Kebangsaan Malaysia. She's the co-researcher in the first national nutrition survey ever carried out in Malaysia, the Malaysian Adult Nutrition Survey. Very much the SIFU as far as nutrition in this country is concerned. She was involved in several national task forces to formulate the nutritional policies of Malaysia, the recommended nutrient intakes of Malaysia, the Malaysian dietary guidelines, and others. Of course, we couldn't leave out our physical education aspect of this nutritional survey, and we have Dr. Nahar Singh, who is the Deputy Director at the Teacher Education Institute, Rajan Malewa campus. Dr. Mihanda is the team lead lab pertaining to the Malaysian Education Blueprint 2013 to 2025. I'd love to grill him on that, but we will not digress today. He's also Chairman, Review Committee for the National Physical Fitness Norms, Ministry of Youth and Sport from 2006 to 2009, also a committee member of the Malaysian Association for Physical Education, Sports Science and Fitness. We cannot leave out our consultant pediatrician and pediatric cardiologist, ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Yong Junina Fazil, who will give us her take on what we should be asking our pediatrician. And we have on the panel today, joining us, Mummy Puan Jumi Zarina. She's a 35-year-old mother with 4 children, ranging from 4 years to 12 years. They're going to be part of this discussion as well. And Johnny Lack. Johnny Lack is a daddy, 34-year-old father with 2 children, 2 months and 3 years of age. So we're going to continue with this discussion. I'm going to actually kick off with Professor Poe, because there have been, of course, many studies in Asia, we all know, and amongst Malaysian children, how different is Seanuts?
So when we talk about surveys, actually in Malaysia, the Ministry of Health Malaysia has been conducting surveys, nationwide surveys since the 1990s, but the surveys are mostly focused on adults. And there is no nutrition survey until the early 2000s, where we had our first Malaysian adult nutrition survey. So no surveys on children. So because of that, and we want to know what is the nutritional status and health status of Malaysian children, That is why we embarked on the Seanuts survey, which we started in actually year 2009, but the data collection started in year 2010. So this is some sort like a first nationwide survey on the nutritional status of children. Whereas there has been many small studies conducted by UKM, ourselves, and many other universities and research institutions, but those are mostly small studies that is not nationwide.
How was this survey sort of carried out? Because we know you have quantitative surveys, you have qualitative surveys. Quantitative surveys are very much online. You answer a questionnaire, and sometimes that's really not quite representative. Was this you did both?
So when you saw the video just now, actually you can see that it's really a very comprehensive survey. So when we say survey, it is not something like, we just go to some people, adults, or in this case children, and give them a questionnaire, answer some questions. That is the survey that we are mostly used to. We get that in front of giant supermarket when the credit card people come and ask you to fill in some surveys as well. But this is a really comprehensive survey. We had blood tests, we do bone scans, we see how healthy are the bones of the children. Of course, we use questionnaires also, and questionnaires ask the parents about the health status of the children, about their food intake, about the children's physical activity. And besides that, we also did what we call the BIA analysis, which in normal terms we would say we want to see how much body fat or not fat that the children have. Yeah.
Were the findings sort of similar amongst the 4 countries of Vietnam, Thailand?
Okay, so we also saw in the video just now that across all the 4 countries, we actually had both overnutrition and undernutrition problems. But the undernutrition problems are more prevalent in countries that are slightly lower socioeconomically, like Vietnam and Indonesia. And the overnutrition problems is more prevalent in Malaysia and Thailand. And in Vietnam, you can see that the urban children are also going towards overnutrition as well, but not in rural.
What seems to be coming through now is that overnutrition seems to be present in developing countries. Is there a reason for that? Do we see more, fast food coming into developing countries, and hence the reason why we seem to be seeing that trend around the world?
I wouldn't blame it on fast foods. Well, as countries become richer, the people of the countries also become richer, so we can afford to eat more, hopefully more healthy foods, but sometimes not more healthy foods, but basically you can afford to buy more food to feed your family. So this is what we can see. Although the last 2 or 3 years in Malaysia, sometimes we say, oh, we are in financial crisis, people are getting poor, but when you go to these restaurants, sometimes very expensive restaurants, and you can see that it's full. So that is what's happening, I think.
So the more money we have, the more of the wrong food we're eating. I'm not sure. But, is that what you're seeing, Dr. Junina, amongst your patients?
Certainly, I'm seeing children who are getting bigger each year. Okay. Previously, you don't see quite so many children who exceed the 75th percentile for their BMI for age, but now I'm seeing more children who are exceeding the 75th percentile. And I think it cannot be denied that Asians in general and Malaysians in particular love food. The first question we ask people is, have you eaten? What did you eat for breakfast? Would you like some nasi lemak? And the more money you have, the more likely you are to indulge in more nasi lemak. Or not just nasi lemak, please don't take me wrong, don't get me wrong, but more food, okay? And couple that with a more sedentary lifestyle, because money also buys more gadgets, and because of the current situation where we are worried for our children's safety, children are not allowed to play out as much, and thanks to the haze and inclement weather, children tend to stay indoors more. So they're more likely to be sitting in front of the TV or the gadget, munching on some snacks while playing a game. I mean, recently I asked a child if you played games, and he said, yes. After the diet, do you play games? Yes. What game do you play? PlayStation. I play football. Oh, which one? FIFA, whichever one it is, on the console. It is no longer a physical ball outside. That was his idea of playing football.
See, the other problem I find is sometimes as parents, we sort of pass on this responsibility of our children as far as nutrition, academics, as well as physical fitness to the school, rather than taking it on ourselves as a responsibility. So hence where Dr. Mihanda comes in, you actually, your role as a health and physical educator, what do you actually do for the schools in Malaysia?
Thank you, Mira. It's interesting. The findings are undernutrition and overnutrition. I'll take it from overnutrition on this side, and the feedback from kids who visit Dr. Young in the clinic doing very little physical activity. You can get them, you can feed them the best food, but we also need some outlet for energy expenditure. There is a myth, and the myth is we think that children are active. But children are not really active the present day. How are they different from the previous generation? Kids walk to school, had family chores, play. They were playing the whole day. If you ask the younger generation that's here, ask your parents, you did not need to join a swimming club because there was sufficient number of children in your neighborhood to keep you busy. So there was physical activity going on. Therefore, currently, for some kids, the only provider of physical activity are schools through their physical education program. Schools need to conduct, which they are doing, good physical education programs. Parents need to support this physical education program in schools. Make sure your kids go with their change for sports and not in their actual school attire. Parents have to take extra trouble for all that. Kids in schools are a captive audience. The best place currently with our present landscape, if a child is living on the 14th floor of condominium, when he or she returns from school, then you will probably be at the so-called PlayStation. That's physical activity. Only place for physical activity currently, the best place in our system, we're not like West Germany, where the parents make sure kids join sports clubs and so forth. They're very actively involved in sports for all as well as sports at high performance. But kids in Malaysia, schools would seem to be the best place to nurture physical activity. And one of the ways is physical education through co-curriculum activities, and not forgetting the ministry's special effort in creating the one child, one sport policy. Yeah, I'll leave at that for the time.
The National Education Blueprint, you were very much a part of. Are there sections of that blueprint that look at physical education and nutrition?
We're actually looking at it systemically. As a system, we want to improve classroom teaching. And when we say classroom teaching, it involves all subjects, including physical education. We want to make sure we are able to provide trained physical education teachers in schools. And so that there's quality physical education being taught. And that is addressed in the blueprint. And definitely we are also trying to get more funds. My colleagues in the sports division in the ministry always trying to get more equipment for kids in schools, because those are things that actually attract kids to physical activity. So we are actually in the right direction.
Professor Poe, just key findings. We know there was overnutrition, there was undernutrition. What is the ratios of obesity and undernutrition in the country?
Okay, so when we look at overweight and obesity, the prevalence of the problem is more than 20%. So more than 20% of our children are actually either overweight or obese. Whereas if we look at thinness is about 5%, and stunting means too short for their age, that's about 8%. So that's why we say in Malaysia the problem of overnutrition is more than undernutrition. And besides that, when we look at undernutrition or more specifically micronutrient deficiencies, in Malaysia we have vitamin A deficiency problem, but that's not a major public health problem. More of a public health problem is vitamin D deficiency, where close to 50% of our children does not get enough vitamin D.
That is very good. Okay. Vitamin D is your sunshine vitamin. It doesn't quite make sense. We live in a country where we have a lot of sun. Dr. Janina, what's going on?
Well, vitamin D, as you said, comes from the sun because it converts the inactive form in the skin, which then goes on to be converted into the active form, and it is important for calcium absorption. But despite having a lot of sunlight, we have a lot of other issues that we have to address. The haze, how much is actually reaching our children? How much time do we actually spend outdoors without sunblock? Because once you use sunblock, you are effectively blocking the UVB rays, which is what's important in converting vitamin D. How much is the sun reaching ourselves? I just read up and I found out that if you're in the car, even though we feel hot, we're not actually getting the UVB rays, you see. So yes, you may be sweating in the car, but it doesn't mean we're getting enough vitamin D. And in this day and age, when you go out, if you're covered up, again, you don't get enough exposure. Some papers say that you need as little as 15 to 20 minutes of sunlight a day, but that depends on skin color as well. And the darker you are, the longer you have to be out in the sun. But if you go out in the sun in the morning and you put on sunblock for the children as well, and then you go into an air-conditioned building and you don't come out until 7:30 in the evening, you're going to be hard-pressed to get 15 to 20 minutes worth of sunlight. So you have to get vitamin D from somewhere else, not just the sun.
Okay, we'll come back to that whole thought. Where do we get vitamin D from? But Johnny and Junior, would you have a question for either one of our panelists?
I have a question. What is the best time for the kids to be under the sun? The best time, actually, first they have a curriculum in school, sometimes in the morning and also in the afternoon. So which time is the best actually?
Actually, there is no best time. So for sometimes you hear people say it's between 10 to 2, but 10 to 2, it could be other countries where the sun is not so hot. But in Malaysia, if you just imagine yourself going out at, let's say at 12 o'clock in the afternoon, we'll be saying, hey, it's too hot, you're getting burnt, and you come in. So the most important, I think, is getting the sun exposure without the sunblock. So, and that is why it's not just Malaysia that we have this vitamin D deficiency problem. It's also prevalent throughout all the 4 countries that we do the Seanuts survey in. And that's because as Asians, we always think that being fair is beautiful. If you are a Caucasian, you want to get brown, you want to get dark, and that's beautiful. But Asians think that being fair is beautiful, so we tend to stay in. So if we go out, we'll either be carrying our umbrellas or wearing hats. And if you sit in the car and you say, okay, there's sun shining through and I'm getting some sun, but like Dr. Yong said, if you have this, what you call those things, V-cool, or even the window of your car is blocking out the UV rays that is needed. So you are just getting the light, not the rays that needs to convert the vitamin D into usable. So we really need to think, how is it possible for us to get more sun, or if it's not possible, then alternative sources of vitamin D.
I have two questions. One is for Professor Bo and one is for Professor Michael. Professor Bo, my daughter is 3 years old right now. How can I tell that she's actually over thinning or started? Because when she was born, she was actually quite small, so small, 2.5 kgs. And a lot of my relatives still telling me, wow, what you feed her? So small until now. So right now.
I can answer this question, but maybe better just bring to Dr. Yong's team. She can help you. Basically, we teach parents how to monitor the children's growth. So there are growth charts that you can plot for your child to see where she is actually. But maybe the first step is, I'm sure your child is 3 years old, you regularly bring her to see a doctor, not just when she's sick, but also just for wellness checking or injection, where the doctor will weigh your child. So if you can get a growth chart, you just plot the weight. To me, as long as the child is growing, they can't be expected to be growing from a small size suddenly to become a giant-sized child. But if she's growing, I think she should be fine. Maybe Dr. Yong can say something.
But one size doesn't fit all. So what is important is that they're growing at a normal rate, not reach a certain. Not every child at the age of 1 must be 10 kilos. If the child was born at 4 kilos, then probably he or she will attain that weight earlier. But then again, it depends on what transpires between 0 and 12 months. But if he or she was born at 1.8 kilos at birth, or 2.5 in the case of your child, then the rate of growth may be the same, but the final weight at that age will be lower than somebody who was born at a higher weight. And we've also found that if they gain weight at too rapid a pace, it's also not good for them. So if as Professor Pope put it, if your child is active, if your child is healthy, and is gaining weight, then it shouldn't be too great.
How do we stay grounded, Dr. Yong? Because our uncles and aunties put so much pressure on us that our children have to look healthy, have to look prosperous. How? Then when sometimes you're so torn. I mean, you worry that your child is undernourished or not, eating enough. And we have a lot of picky children nowadays, so particular with what they're actually. I don't want to eat this. I don't want to eat that. Then what do you do?
The first thing is to counsel the parents. Because when they say the child is a picky eater, we've got to look back and see. Very often we get this comment, Doctor, my child doesn't want to eat anything. She doesn't want to eat anything at all. And I look at the child, she's far from being underweight. She's playing with the Lego in the room. She's active, she's not sick. And when you dig deeper, it's not that they don't eat anything. They don't eat rice with soup and fish and chicken. They're very happy to eat other sources of carbohydrate, like bread or noodles. So you got to break down and say, as long as they eat carbohydrate, protein, a bit of fat, and some fiber, that's okay. Yesterday I had one who was feeding brown rice to her child, and was asking, and the child refused to eat. But they haven't tried anything else. So again, it's not, sometimes it's what is offered to the child, sometimes it's perception. And about looking good, healthy and prosperous, we've got to change that picture as well, you see. Sometimes our small children are not actually small, they are normal, but because there's so many other children around them who are bigger, they appear small in comparison.
You had another question?
Yes, Dr. Michael, how long should a physical activity be according to standards of Malaysians? How long do you bring him out for a walk or for some visits, half a day or 2 hours or 1 hour?
Very interesting question. But before I answer your question, I want to just put you at ease. That always look onto your right and your left. There are other people in the same boat as you. I'm one of them. Look at the father. Father is big. Mother is big. The child is very small. Punjabi kids are supposed to be looking very big. Just to share with your audience. they're supposed to be, we were just talking before the show that the Punjabis are known to be the top milk drinkers, milk makers and milk drinkers. Because we're the one who started the initial dairy farms in Malaysia. So, and my little girl is little, so I'll prepare a question and answer sheet like this. I have all the answers for my relatives as well. Okay, for children like your daughter who's 3 years old, there's a mechanism within the child. Children are meant more for anaerobic kind of activity, means short spurts. They'll do for 3 minutes, 4 minutes, 5 minutes, and then they need rest. Let them rest, and after a couple of minutes, they'll go out and want to do something else again. It's more anaerobic. And this can be done until they feel that that's sufficient. And that's it. But it's not like a regimented, unless you plan to train your daughter to become a gymnast. Then you're going to do some flexibility exercises. If you all remember, the first girl to score 10 points on in gymnastics, Nadia Comaneci, started training at the age of 4 for gymnastics. For certain sports, yes. But I'm sure we're talking about any child. So there is this mechanism, but they will stop. Maybe Dr. Yong can also add regarding this.
Well, the American Academy of Pediatrics recommends 1 hour of physical activity each day, but that's again for school-going children. As you say, at 3.5 is short spurts.
And in terms of activity, what do you really mean? I mean, does it have to be, continuous walking or, for 1 hour? How do you decide that?
I think for young children like 3 years old, maybe toddler age 3, 4 years old, there shouldn't be any like regimented, let's go, we need to go for a walk. They are not interested. I think most important for parents is to quit telling their children to sit still. Because young children will jump up on the chair and climb around and you say, please sit still. So at that age, it's very difficult for them to sit still, but once they get used to hearing this word sit still and they grow older, they will sit still. And that's what we don't want.
And just to go back to vitamin D deficiency, half the sample size was vitamin D deficient. What are the consequences of that, Dr. Yong?
If a person has low levels of vitamin D, and chances are the body is not going to absorb enough calcium. And when you don't have enough calcium in the blood, then calcium has to be taken from the bone. And when that happens, that person is at risk of rickets as a child and osteoporosis in adulthood, especially for women after the menopause. So children and adults who have low levels of vitamin D and low levels of calcium will end up with aches and pains, and they can fracture easily, especially when they're older.
And when I was reading somewhere, it said that vitamin D is perhaps the single most underrated nutrient in the world. Is that an exaggeration?
I don't think so. I think it's because most of us take it for granted that, especially in tropical countries, we have the sun. We shouldn't be lacking in vitamin D. And until recent years, we think that we are all getting enough vitamin D, but it's not just the Seanuts survey findings that is reporting that vitamin D is deficient among children. In Malaysia and across many other countries, even in tropical countries, there has been many studies that consistently reports that there is vitamin deficiency occurring, even though we are so-called sunshine countries.
Yeah. So how do we overcome this deficiency? I mean, where do we get this source of vitamin D then if we're not getting out too much in the sun? And I don't see this problem getting solved in the near future, so we need to actually address it some other way. And how do we do that?
I think Prabhu will be the best person to speak about food source.
I think there are not many foods out there that has naturally high levels of vitamin D. So among them would be, for example, fatty fish. So those would be more towards like temperate country fish, which is very expensive to buy in Malaysia. Well, it's being sold, but it's expensive. And possibly from liver or organs, and those are foods that, okay, you can eat every once in a while, but we don't encourage you to take that in a large quantity very regularly. So milk would be one of the best sources of vitamin D, especially for children, where we always say never quit drinking milk until their bones are well formed, and even then continue drinking milk to prevent osteoporosis in later life. So as a source of vitamin D, milk, raw milk, fresh milk that you buy from directly from the how do you call these people? Punjabi. Punjabi, yes.
It's a dying trade now. He's not doing it anymore.
Yeah, milk vendors. We still see them, riding their motorcycles around actually. Yeah, very rarely, but they are still around. The content of vitamin D would not be that high. So if, like most of us, when we buy milk, we buy it from the supermarket shelves. Most of the milk there are actually vitamin D 45.
45, all right. So you have fresh milk, you have pasteurized milk. Does that make a difference?
Not really. We don't. It doesn't matter whether it's fresh or pasteurized or even powdered milk. Malaysians tend to use a lot of powdered milk. What is important is for us to read the nutrition labels. So in the nutrition labels, you can actually see how much amount is not just vitamin D, but other nutrients as well. So it's important for parents to learn how to read labels.
We have an obesity problem, you just mentioned, right? So then you have this problem of full cream milk. Should children, and I've always been against low-fat milk for children. I don't know, it's just a mental, it's a perception. I don't know. What do you think, Dr. Young? Is it okay to give our children low-fat milk?
It is okay to give children low-fat milk, especially if they're 5 years or above, because they're also getting their fats from other sources. And you want to cut down the calories, but you don't want to cut back or to deprive them of calcium and vitamin D. And again, you want them to continue drinking milk. They don't have to drink 3 glasses a day, but you can use low-fat milk in their cereals, for example. Or you can just get them to drink a glass of low-fat milk a day. It still contains adequate nutrition.
Professor Bo, back to the nutrition label. How would I know what is actually correct? Is there a standard that I follow? Okay, 3 years old, feed certain amount of this?
Yes, there is a standard where 2 years old you must feed a certain amount of this or that, and that is called the recommended nutrient intakes. But nutritionists and doctors don't usually teach recommended nutrient intakes to parents because it's very difficult to comprehend all these little numbers, so many numbers, and add up all together. So when we teach to parents, we actually teach in terms of food. How much food, or in this case milk, a child should drink. So about 2 to 3 servings is enough, and 1 serving is something like 1 cup. So 2 to 3 cups a day of milk is enough. So that's just for milk, but for any other food, we also teach in terms of how much of a portion of the food is enough for certain age groups of children. Yeah.
Dr. Nihanda, in terms of physical education, it's more than addressing the problem of obesity, isn't it? There's a lot going on in the body when one actually gets involved in physical activity. Maybe you just want to go through that.
I like what Prof. Bo had mentioned earlier, that our body is actually structured to move the joints, the muscles, and it's more so for kids. In many of my encounters with school principals and primary school heads, I used to tell them, that allow the children to run freely with supervision. Why? Because there is this innate thing in children that they want to be physically active. What sometimes happens is, get all the children into the cafeteria, sit on benches, waiting for the afternoon session to start. But actually they would wish to be running around. And when you control them that way, you're actually forcing them not to be physically active. And what they do, they start becoming naughty, they start doing all sorts of things. So physical activity is a form of energy expenditure, the energy that's in the child. Our concern is definitely with children going into secondary school. Research has shown, it's not a very nice statement I'm making looking at the audience, the decline in physical activity is higher among girls as compared to boys. Okay, so look at the trend. So when physical activity declines, body fat increases. It's in most countries, these patterns are already there. So we would want children to be physically active for at least 1 hour, at least 1 hour a day. Actually, if you can play. Exercise is supposed to be regimented based on certain principles of exercise. But when we say play, you can do anything. You do not even have to follow rules of anything that when you're playing. What we want you to be is physically active for at least 1 hour a day.
And to go out in the sun as well.
Definitely in the sun would be the best. And in schools as well. All of us, I think most came through that system where children actually everyone used to wait for the PE lesson. And if today you do a survey, do you enjoy, unless you get not a very nice teacher who herself or himself does not really change and want to do PE with the kids. So I think, definitely outdoors would be the best for Malaysian weather.
The girls are not being physically active because all the boys want to marry the fair girl. So they're not going out in the sun to clean somebody all the time. The jokes aside, but in terms of parents, Dr. Kanda, how do we get our children going out at home instead of just depending on the school? Just before that, what is the policy for physical education in schools?
It's twice a week in secondary schools and twice a week in primary schools. And children are supposed to be out. And there is a curriculum for it. It's all planned, structured, formalized. Physical education. It's actually physical education is very much using the science of exercise. It's not the cafeteria approach to teaching physical education. When the kids come and the teacher stands in front and says, "What do you want to do today?" It's actually should be the other way around. The teacher has already planned and everything is there. So for that, it's a structured program in schools. So the policy is there, the implementation is there. We will just have to make sure there is continuous quality and monitoring.
How do we do that? As parents,
The schools do that. The PTA, the Parent-Teacher Associations, also take an interest in what happens in physical education and co-curricular activities. But what can parents do? Parents probably will have to be also equally interested. I'm not saying active, it might be a bit too far-fetched, but you have to be interested. I was just relating to Mira. I was talking to my mother and she said my niece wants to do taekwondo. I said, but she was telling me that this girl is fragile. I said, no, I think she's okay. No, she said, no, I don't think so. I said, you have to give her some form of sport, but at least badminton, non-competitive. She's on the other side. No one is going to cross over and come and do anything to her. I said, then she agreed, my grandmother. When we were young, we were playing hockey and she said nothing. I remember someone saying that if I knew grandkids were so lovely, I'd have them first. So actually, parents, you will have to be interested. You have to support children going back to school for co-curricular activities. We have to make an extra effort. Otherwise, we are going to be into all those patterns that Prof. O has mentioned and Dr. Yong is going to mention about the patients that she's seeing, obesity, moving towards coronary heart diseases, hypertension. Those patterns have already been researched upon and it's already indicated. Longitudinal studies have already shown inactive kids will become inactive adolescents and adults. The pattern is already there. So we have to, those are recognized patterns, so parents have to play a role. And awareness about physical activity with, the current explosion of information, there's no excuse that we don't know anything about it. So,
as a sedentary parent, I have an excuse. The legendary traffic jams in KL make it close to impossible for parents to come home in time before sunset to take their kids out for a run or even to play. And usually on weekends, parents spend the weekends cleaning up their house because they don't have any hired help to do that. And very often time spent with the children is pushed to the back burner. This doesn't just involve physical activities, everything. Parents are finding it harder and harder to spend time with children. Previously, when I was growing up, we'd go swimming in the evening when my parents got back from work. Today, by the time my husband braves the jam from PJ back to our home, I work in front of my house, so there's no issue. But by the time my husband gets home, we're lucky if it's not sunset. Now, you think of going out again, everyone just says, forget it. So everyone just sits down, and I'm sedentary. I do not play games. I read books. I knit, I sew. So my children, likewise, are not exposed to physical activity. As a role model, I'm not encouraging them to be active. And I think we have to change ourselves first as adults. Only then can we expect changes in the children.
I remember
that.
You can do, if that sort of behavioral change, if we can produce that, I think that's excellent. We'll be excellent role models for the kids. Parents have to take that extra effort. Definitely the social landscape has changed. We address that, and especially in urban areas, those are our challenges. But challenges will always be there for many, many things. Surprisingly, some parents can make all kinds of arrangements for kids to go for tuition. They will use all methods to make sure that they are willing to pick the maths tuition teacher to come to the house, and it's fantastic. It's just that how much of leeway can we also make for sports, exercise, physical fitness, if not back to the school but in the community. I must say, it's not only parents but the community per se and the local councils are also equally responsible. You can't have a population of few thousand and there's no space for play and physical activity.
I think to be really anal about it, you really need to schedule that time for physical activity with your children. We all have calendars, put it in and just do it. That's the only way it's actually going to happen. Johnny, you have a question?
Just to add on, actually I believe children, for young adults and also parents, they are actually a source of motivation. If we put time for them to like Dr. Mani, if we are able to allocate time for them, it will be for their future benefit also. And also, right now there's a lot of social problems. It's because children and parents are not close at home. You ask your children, what are you doing today? They'll just look at you, just now I was in front of a computer, on Facebook. After that, maybe on PlayStation. The activities, that's all. So they have nothing to tell you, so you don't know anything about them. So if we make time for them, let's say Monday to Fridays we got no time. Okay, I know Kera has a lot of problems also. So Saturdays, Sundays we can schedule once a month. So once a month we cannot make it twice a month. We try to have it more. So if that gets better interaction, and they will have their own physical activities, and there will be companionship with them also.
Just to conclude, it's a multi-sectoral approach to this whole problem, really. But how would you conclude, Professor Paul?
I think what I'd like to say is to put together what Dr. Yong and Dr. Mahinder mentioned just now, where we think that being physically active, a child who spends a lot of time on sports will take away his time from attending tuitions and performing well in exams. But actually that's not true. There have been many studies that have shown that children who are more active are actually have better IQ and perform better academically in their exams. So that apart, our own Seanuts study actually shows that normal weight, healthy children also have better IQs and cognition compared to those who are overweight and obese, as well as those who are underweight and stunted. So overweight and obese children are actually 2 times more at risk of having low IQ, and the underweight and stunted children are 3 times more likely to be having lower IQ than the normal.
That is very important information. I think every parent should know that, don't you think? Dr. Yong, how would you conclude?
I think we all agree that our children are the future of the nation, and it is they who will lead the nation forward. And starting them right with the correct amount of nutrition, allowing normal growth, will ensure that they develop normally with normal IQ. And this will serve them well in knowledge acquisition today and the future, and this will translate into a better future for the nation. Dr. Mahinder?
There are 4 critical stages that we have to be very careful of in the growth, in the lifestyle, physical lifestyle of children. Firstly, from age 4 to 7, the first exposure to schools. How well are they going to take all these new happenings in their life? Secondly, pre-secondary, the age of puberty, children get shy, some will go on to physical activity, some will not. Thirdly, the teenage period, where they start having other preferences, wanting to look good. We're looking many times into the mirror, age 15 to 16. And in Malaysia, that's when we all get very exam-oriented fever, SPM at the age of 17. That's another crucial stage. And finally, when behaviors have already been tracked now and graded, that's between the age of 18 to 20. At that point, you go to universities, you will see that same group of people on the field, the rest are all hibernating. So these are critical stages that we have to look into. But at the end of the day, it's important that we get children to participate in aerobic sort of activities that will improve flexibility, strength, and muscular endurance. Be involved in sports and games to improve your motor skills. And finally, to be well informed about exercise, physical activity, and games per se.
Thank you all very much. Ladies and gentlemen, our panelists for this morning. Can I just come in to have a seat?